We'll be getting started here any second.
Okay. How's the connection? Is it better?
Yeah, seems better. Yeah. All right, we're getting started.
So you can do the intro.
One,
Or, I can do
1, 3, and 4.
Yeah. Am I doing intro?
Perfect. All right.
1,
so
3, and 4, not 1, 2, and 4.
that's what I asked you.
You said 1, 3, 4 yourself too.
1, 3, 4. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Perfect. All right. Technical difficulties. We are live on the Wild and Precious Optimal Living Show. Thank you so much for everybody tuning in today. I am your host, Dr. Sam, and the wonderful.
I am Dr. Lynn, and we are super excited to be on today with our fellow classmate and Parker alumni, and so Dr. Demi. And so just a little bit more about our radio show for those of you who are new to tuning in to Wild and Precious Optimal Living Radio. We talk about all things that increases your emotional, your brain, as well as your physical resilience. And today we're excited to be able to talk about all things pre-pregnancy.
Yeah, so if you are, as always, our show is sponsored by our practice, Wild and Precious Optimal Living. We are a neurologically based chiropractic office located in the beautiful Wheat Ridge, Colorado. So if you are a family in the area, if you're looking for an alternative to pharmaceutical route, if you're a family struggling with a child with ADHD, sensory processing, or even autism, and you're just looking for something different, then I invite you to come check out our practice. Come check out and see what we do and see if we are potentially the right fit for you. And as Dr. Lynn let the cat out of the bag earlier today,
I always do that.
we have online the wonderful and super intelligent Dr. Demi Midlow, all the way from Dallas, Texas. And as Dr. Lynn said, she was a classmate of ours, and I'll let Dr. Lynn read the intro.
Yes, so Demi is a doctor of chiropractic and a certified functional medicine practitioner. And Dr. Demi works to find the root cause of your health problems and help reconnect your body to its natural healing source through nutrigenomics and lifestyle medicine. As well, Dr. Demi's passion for health began as a young athlete and eventually a competitive triathlete looking for any edge in performance. She believes that lifetime health is achieved through preventative care and removing interference to the body's natural ability to heal itself. Therefore, her goal is to care for the individual prior to conception and throughout life. Her passion is preconception health, but she works with all individuals who wish to regain their health and thrive in life. And I do believe this is what makes us really align together as classmates and as friends too, because we're all fellow parents and in this journey of healing from the inside out. So, Dr. Demi, we're so excited to be able to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here, so thanks for inviting me.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. So, yeah, I think it's super cool seeing how long friendships can last and even what they can manifest into. Because, I mean, for the audience out there, I met Demi, now Dr. Demi, I think one of the first days at Parker, sitting right behind me in Dr. G's anatomy class. And, man, here we are, 7 years later, something like that, jamming on the radio.
Yeah, those were the days where you were like, what did we sign up for? Are we going to survive this?
We lived in the library.
All that fun stuff. And now here we are, experts in the field, and we're going to drop some knowledge on people. And we good, sir? Yeah? Our station manager here is checking in on us, making sure everything's good. I'm on 1, 3, and 4. Are we on the right mics?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. All right, folks, we are good. We're sounding great. We're crystal clear here on KUHS Denver. So let's just jump right in. So we're talking pre-pregnancy today because right now in the healthcare world and even in the pregnancy world, there is a pretty big schism going on, and there's a lot of women out there and couples out there really struggling with this pregnancy dilemma of either having issues getting pregnant, either having issues during the pregnancy, and we want to dive into a lot of that today. And that's why we got Dr. Demi on, because she's really the expert in this particular arena. So I want to start with the first question. If a couple wants to get pregnant, where do they start? Where does this journey begin?
Well, ideally, in a perfect world, we start, couples start talking about it and planning for it well in advance. Really giving your body time to, almost prep. I have an athletic background, so I always use like sports analogies. And really, like if you were training for a competition or a race, like it's like training for conception, right? And so ideally, you make this decision together, and you want to have this optimal, healthy pregnancy. So it's a shared, both husband and wife, mom and dad, to be embark on this healing journey. And so in an ideal world, you'd know when you want to start trying, and you would start working on changing these lifestyle habits and behaviors at least 4 to 6 months before trying to conceive.
Why 4 to 6 months? Why is that the particular window?
Yeah, so great question. So it really takes 120 days to create a new healthy egg, and new healthy sperm, it takes 72 days. So 120 days, about 4 months. So if we can get husband and wife to be on the protocol for 4 months, then before we even start trying, then we feel like we have stacked the deck and given those parents not only the best chance to conceive quickly, but first and foremost, always healthfully. And really, the best part about this is, unfortunately, sometimes, we can love our kids and we can love our spouses, unfortunately, more than we love ourselves. But the best part about this is, pregnancy is going to be the side effect of making mom and dad to be healthy people.
That's awesome. So 4 to 6 months out, we start to then think about the biology of what's happening. So what are some of the first initial things that you're considering when someone's coming in saying, hey, Dr. Demi, we want to get pregnant and we want to make sure we have the best possible chances of having a super healthy baby? Where do we begin? You told me 4 to 6 months, but where do we go from there?
Yeah, so basically, programming and protocol is, designed on what we call, kind of a new hot term is lifestyle medicine. And really, that's just, creating healthy habit behaviors and what we call the most important pillars of health. So looking at your environment, looking at your sleep and rest, your nutrition, your exercise, how are you taking care of your mental health, past traumas, things like that. Do you have strong social connections and support? Those are really the major areas that we focus and really need to find out where they're at, because everyone comes in at a different level, and we usually need to spend more time depending on the couple, in certain areas, and that's where working one-on-one, really it's much more beneficial being able to individualize it to couples. And then also where the functional medicine component comes into it is we really want to know exactly where you stand with your health, okay? Because I'm sure you guys probably experience this too. You have a new patient, and they say, "Oh, you're pretty healthy," and that's a very subjective. What is health? I don't think we exactly know in this country anymore. And so the other thing we do is we test. You hear the tagline, "Test, don't guess," in functional medicine all the time. So we do some hormone analysis for both mom and dad. The test that I prefer is something called the Dutch test. It's a combo urine salivary sample. And sometimes, we definitely are looking at hormones. Sometimes we do, a basic serum profile, metabolic panel, and a CBC, things that your general practitioner would run as well. And then depending on, specifically what they're coming in with, if this is not, a first pregnancy and we had complications in a previous pregnancy, we might look at some genetics as well. Definitely just depends, but we're always going to do some type of analysis to know exactly where their health stands.
Okay, that's awesome. And with that too, with looking at like the Dutch test, what particular hormones are you trying to focus on? And are there ways that you're trying to modulate that to get those back in balance if they are out of balance?
Absolutely. So the Dutch test looks at all the major sex hormones that if you went to your endocrinologist or OB, that they would run, only they would run a serum test. And the data is showing that the urine salivary combo is really great. The other aspect of this test is it's taken, 9 to 11 days post-ovulation, which gives us the best information, and it also is timed throughout the day to reflect cortisol the best. So the second ones we're looking at progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, estrogen, and then for cortisol is really so inaccurate on a blood draw. Our cortisol has a 24-hour pattern. That's where we start looking into biological and circadian rhythms. And we really know nothing if we aren't knowing exactly where it stands in that whole pattern. So there's 4 collections throughout the day. The basic Dutch test is all urine. If we do suspect that there are a lot of stress, cortisol, adrenal, melatonin issues, then we do the upgraded Dutch Plus, which is a saliva sample, which is the best way to look at cortisol. So we're looking at the same things, we're just looking at them at a different window. And then the amount of information that is given, this is where the Dutch test is really, I really geek out, and this is one of my favorites, is because we're not just looking at a serum estradiol, which is, one form of estrogen, looking at all 3. So we're not just finding out if you're ovulating, which obviously we need to know, but we're also getting a deeper dive of mom and dad's health, because we're looking at all 3 estrogens. We're looking at how the body is detoxing and metabolizing these estrogens, which also gives us a hint at some genetics like a comp gene or an MTHFR, which I know we'll get into a little bit. But also, if we are not really, metabolizing and excreting, then we're increasing our chances for breast and ovarian cancer as well. So like I said, we're trying to improve everyone's health, not just to have a healthy baby. And then the other factors on the Dutch test is really so much more than any other functional test on the market. It gives us some indication of neurotransmitter levels. So that really comes into our mental health and mood disorders, and a couple of the major organic acids. So organic acids are metabolites, byproducts of everyday functions of our body. So if you exercise, we know lactic acid is a byproduct of exercise. That's where we get that soreness. So we're looking at some of the major functions of the body and seeing these byproducts to find out, is the body running efficiently or not? And so all of these things, from hormones to organic acids to detox, we're getting so much information of how we can specifically help each and every one of these individuals.
So for some of our listeners out there who are really new to understanding what functional medicine is, and they may be starting to think about their own personal diets, what do you find from your lab scans and lab tests? Do you typically find that there are certain diets that may be contributing to certain trends that you're seeing nowadays from women who are coming into your office who are interested in getting pregnant, in terms of like food or?
Yeah, as far as diet trends, it's tough because, I think that sometimes we look for a certain diet to be the solution to everything, and I find that a lot of these really popular ones, can work short term, but, drive different issues. I do try to work with everyone, whether I think it's the most optimal diet, I try to meet them where they're at. So, if I have someone who's really adamant, it's important to them, to be vegan, I'm not going to change that. I really respect and honor values, behind that for a lot of reasons. But there are some areas that we need to supplement for pregnancy, for, to develop a healthy fetus. There's some new things like a carnivore super super popular right now, and I really, we have no longitudinal evidence of the safety of it, but at the same time, we've seen people healing autoimmune conditions, and so I try to be open-minded to everything, but when it comes to having a baby, building a baby, I really think we need to be as safe as possible and not really on the outskirts and fringe and trying new things. So, as far as diets, we stick to the things that we know are absolutely most important. We know fatty fish and fish oils are wonderful, packed with DHA for baby brain development. Choline, super important for building cells. So there's definitely specific things that we the diet around, but at the same time try to be respectful of each individual and their diet choices.
Absolutely. So I guess nutrition can be a stressor that can potentially, based on their normal eating habits before coming into you, could change some of the hormone balances that you're seeing when you're doing these lab tests, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like, for example, women's hormones love seeds. There's a popular thing called seed cycling going on, and it's to try and balance hormones. In the first couple of weeks of your cycle, you would consume pumpkin seeds and brown flaxseed, and this that's going to raise the estrogen. And then in the second half of your cycle, you're going to consume sesame seeds and sunflower seeds, and that's going to help raise the progesterone. So we have a lot of food-based interventions like that, and then can also do some herbal supplementation, nutrient supplementation as well to pick up or bring down hormones where we need to.
I'm just curious with a lot of, perhaps when you're looking at some of these, like for example the Dutch test, and if you're finding some things that are abnormal, it's not just necessarily dietary, but are there, especially trying to think about what's timely right now with pandemic and where women are at in terms of stressors that they're going through, even though they want to conceive, then there's these uncertainties with the pandemic. What are you seeing when people are walking in and they're wanting to conceive, however perhaps their lifestyle has shifted because of this pandemic time?
That's a super great question. My biggest concern right now with the pandemic is the fear of pregnant mothers. Yeah. So, if you, during pregnancy, if you are consumed by fear and worry and stress, your baby is swimming in a sea of those same worries, stress. They're swimming in cortisol, and we know that if mom pregnancy is super stressed, then it puts that baby at risk for hypercortisolemia, right? It's for being a more stressed child. I don't mean to scare people. I can tell you, and I know we were pregnant around the same time, so I can tell you I was incredibly stressed out during my pregnancy.
I know,
and he's okay. But we were pregnant during our final internships of chiropractic school and trying to graduate and working so hard and being so pregnant. And I did my best, but to some degree that was just, what I was dealing with. And there's things that we can do, especially you guys know, being neurologically based, there's things that we can do after, but if we can prevent it. So if I have moms coming in right now, and that's what I'm sensing, that extreme fear and worry, first of all, I'm just going to be completely honest and say that if we can't, come to some acceptance or peace, would we be okay waiting? Could we wait a little bit till times are a little bit more stable? Or, can we work with some other practitioners? Can we work with a counselor? Can we do some tapping? Can we learn to meditate? Can we do some breath work? Because if we can learn to be here and now and at peace and trust in our bodies and focus on what we can control, then we can absolutely have a healthy, wonderful pregnancy. But the focus really does have to move away from fear.
What are the kind of strategies do you recommend for dealing with stress? Because I know in Western medicine, and some of the moms out there will hear from their general practitioner, well, hey, you're pregnant, so decrease your stress. Go home and decrease your stress levels. And it's like telling a person to fly. I mean, it's almost like this impossible task of like, hey, I need to go accomplish this, but how do I do it with absolutely no guidance? So what are some steps and things that you tell people to do at home or on their own to be able to, quote unquote, decrease their stress levels?
Exactly. So some of the things that I just mentioned, okay, but I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I used to be like a super driven, push through everything type of athlete, and that's how I solved everything. And of course, that does not solve everything. So this is definitely an area that I had to learn and grow in. 5 to 7 years ago, you told me to meditate, which I will, that was too much for me. So I kind of tend to, just see where that patient is at. And some are some are already meditating, ready to evolve a meditation practice. But for some, I literally start with, we start with mindfulness and recognizing when we're in stress, right? Most people, can't recognize the triggers. What does, turn on that stress response for them? So tuning into the body and then connecting with the breath, even if that is just for 2 minutes in that moment. And so there's different strategies, box breathing, or just keeping it simple and 4 to 5 counts inhale, 4 to 5 counts exhale. And, I promise after 2 minutes, you're going to feel that shift. So, teaching little skills there, and then, always have great, great practitioners and providers in the area if they feel like, they need more one-on-one with things like that. But sometimes we overcomplicate it, and it could be as simple as going for a walk. Like maybe after dinner, you and your partner go for a walk and talk about your concerns, having a support system, having, someone to share these fears with. Sometimes we just need to express and get them out of our heads. Exercise, healthy, moderate amount of exercise in the right type. This is where yoga is amazing because, we're connecting breath and movement. We're removing all those distractions. So I absolutely love that. And of course, yoga is a great exercise to continue through pregnancy. You're not a fan, are you, Lynn?
Oh, I'm a fan. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I think definitely identifying stressors and then also, taking this in a totally different context. We learned, the three of us in chiropractic, that stress is so much more than mental, emotional stress also. So we're also really digging into, what are the toxic stressors in our environment, and physical stressors as well. I mean, whether we're at home working at a computer desk in a position that even physically starts to turn on our stress response. So we really dig into all aspects of stress.
So we're talking about so many different stressors that can be, that moms should take into consideration as they're getting ready for conception or preparing your body. But you mentioned prevention too, right? So what is it truly that we're trying to prevent when we are trying to turn our, like athletes, we want to train our bodies for pregnancy? Why is that so important? Like, what is the outcome of that when our bodies are healthier, when we are physically healthier from the inside out? Like, what are we hoping to prevent?
So what this really comes down to me, is epigenetics. And really what the term means, means above, where we can be above our genetics.
Yeah.
So we all have our kryptonite, our weaknesses. Every single person that I look at, we've got areas of health and function that, we were totally blessed and it's not a concern, but we all have weaknesses. So regardless, it's nice to find those out and know what we're working with. But no matter what, what research in the last 20 years have shown us, especially since the Human Genome Project in the early 2000s, is that our environment, our lifestyle, what we do, what we are around, what we surround ourselves with, is really what controls our health. So, whether we live in a toxic soup or, we try so greatly to make the best health decisions we can, is really going to be what turns those problematic genes on or off. So it gives us the power. So it's no longer this runs in my family, I'm going to have diabetes, I'm going to have cancer. My mom had so many miscarriages, so I'm worried that I'm going to. We can change this. No one really has to have that faith when we give it the time and make the right changes.
I see. So for our listeners, just to understand why we want to be able to take proactive steps for healthier living, is to make sure that our bodies are in a state to be able to host or hold that new egg or new baby in our wombs. And at the same time, for Dr. Sam and me, we see a lot of kiddos who are born with primitive, who are struggling with child developmental brain functions, dysfunctions. And so oftentimes I do wonder, does that come from mom's health, right? Or does that come from, what was mom's health? That's always usually a question, although I think we don't deep dive as deeply as we could into it in our own office too. It's just, what was mom's state of health when she was conceiving, and also through pregnancy? And so, it makes me wonder too, it's just like, how far back does it go as we're working with kiddos in terms of that connection with mom, or even from mom to grandmothers too, because mom's health is, she's born, like maybe she had her own personal struggles as well too, genetically. And so, how far back does this go? And I don't know if that's something that you ever think about in your practice or dive deeper into.
Absolutely. So we look specifically here and now, what are the stressors, what are the toxins, what can we remove, but also we absolutely dive into history, because we know that emotional trauma, sexual trauma from grandparents, it absolutely can be passed down. Bessel van der Kolk wrote a book that the body keeps the score, and we can trap emotional traumas in our tissues, in our physical bodies. And then, as far as, nutrients and dietary and famine, going back historically, we now know that the health of our mitochondria, if you can remember back to biology, the mitochondria is the little powerhouse of the cell, that little kidney bean guy, right? And we're finding out, these guys are as important as the good bacteria and the microbiome, and they're intricately connected. They have their own bacteria, and we're now finding out that our mitochondrial health is from our grandmothers. So not only are you ensuring yourself a healthy pregnancy, but also your next generation, your children's children, which is that's friggin' beautiful. And as far as you spoke to the kiddos you're seeing with neurological development delays, and I absolutely believe that we can make a difference on the front end with those issues. The MTHFR gene that I spoke of earlier, we know that most of our genes on the spectrum have a MTHFR genetic mutation, and we get those genes from each parent. So if we can catch those mutations in mom and dad before we even start trying to conceive, we can change their environment. Coming back to epigenetics, we can give them the proteins that they need to positively affect their DNA. I truly believe that we can make that difference. And so I think, for moms and dads who have had kiddos with those issues, they do everything for those kids. And, considering next pregnancies, I think this is the first appropriate step to take, is, to kind of learn, was there anything we could have done differently?
What is an
MTHFR.
MTHFR. I always think of the other word
Yes.
in my mind.
all the means, it is the mother.
Yes, the mother effort. Yes, but what does that look like for kiddos?
Before before you answer that. Before you answer that, I just want to kind of recap. I just want to recap everything that we've been talking about, because we just jumped right in the deep end into a lot of this stuff.
I'm good at doing that.
Our audience and for everybody out there. So I just want to recap a couple things we've talked about and kind of just weave all this together. So, when Dr. Demi's talking about epigenetics, we're talking about the ability to switch on and switch off particular genes, and that's a really critical component to health now, because as she talked about in the Human Genome Project, when they did the actual project, they realized that the number of genes they came up with did not answer the total number of the genes that could make up the human genome. So there was like, wait, where's the rest of it? So what they figured out is that the actual environment can switch on and switch off particular genes and activate particular traits in the human body. Why this is important is because a mom can switch on or switch off particular health attributes and pass it on to her kid. Like you were talking about, another study that they came out with was actual survivors of the Holocaust have passed on certain health attributes to their offspring all the way up to now because of what they went through back in World War II. So the word to sum all this stuff up, and the word we use all the time with everybody, is resilience. Resilience and adaptability, because we're talking about building health resilience to whether it's a pandemic like right now, to it's your daily choices in your life, or to anything. So key in on the fact that we're talking about health resilience and what you can do to build yourself up versus just what you can try and mitigate in your life. Sorry to interrupt.
I love that.
Yeah.
No, I love that. Absolutely. Resilience and adaptability. And that's the thing. When you're working at supporting health from the inside out, supporting our inner healer, we are building that resilience, whether we want to have a healthy baby or we don't, want to horribly suffer with COVID. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. When you're building that resilience, you are going to have better health outcomes.
Absolutely. So, asking about so answer the question, what is the MTHFR gene?
So it stands for methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase, which is why nobody calls it that. But MTHFR is the master enzyme gene regulator of the process of methylation. Okay, methylation is a hot button topic, and it's very confusing and very extensive. But it's also one of the most important functions in our bodies. So it's involved in 200 plus functions in our body, and it makes our DNA. So you can think of it, it's either, depending on what we need the most, it's going to go ahead and make our DNA, or all of these other processes. And it's been correlated strongly with cancer, autism spectrum, pregnancy issues with miscarriage, loss, infertility, preeclampsia. It's most, very well known for the midline defect, spina bifida. This is why folic acid, I believe in the 70s, was put into prenatal vitamins, was to prevent that, and is all based on this MTHFR for methylation. The process chemically is just, passing around carbons and hydrogens, and that we don't need to know, but what we do need to know is it has incredible effects across all aspects of health. Cardiovascular, there really isn't a process that isn't separate from methylation.
So you're talking about folic acid. That's a really critical thing in midline defects, because that actually affects more people than just when they think about spina bifida. What other issues come up with that?
Yeah, so some of the ones that I mentioned, all of those, but specific to the midline defects, we don't see necessarily that full-blown spina bifida. They did do a great job in reducing those outcomes by adding folic acid in. But what we have now started to find all these years later is that folic acid is the synthetic form of what we're trying to give the body. The body wants folate. That's the natural form. But when we chemically made this folic acid, it really got most of the job done. But what it did was leave behind a bunch of itself that the body didn't know what to do with it. And so this unmetabolized folic acid just hangs around. And eventually it started blocking other enzymes, other functions of the body, and creating problems. So the biggest one we see in the birth world, pregnancy world, is the lip and tongue tie. And it is, and we're definitely because we're looking for it. We also often a barrier. So we're definitely finding it more, but I also think we're finding it more because our NTHFR genes are not working optimally because of poor diets, because we're getting this synthetic folic acid. I mean, really and truly, folic acid should be taken out of everything. It's still in prenatal vitamins. You have to know what to look for, and you have to search for the active form of folate in your vitamin to have the proper form. And then, of course, first and foremost, we really want it in your diet. So looking at sources like liver, green leafy vegetables, lentils, things like that.
So why is, knowing that there's evidence right now that we need more folate rather than folic, why are companies still putting folic acid as like some sort of enrichment to the foods itself? Like, why is that still there? Do you know?
Well, I don't truly know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I can, give my opinion. Really, if we just if we just ensured that our mothers were adequately consuming these foods in their diet, and we actually did it, then we wouldn't have the sale of these supplements. The manufacturing, the business, the money-making side of things. Another factor I truly believe is so many people don't know about this. We do because it's evolutionary in the holistic forefront and more natural communities. But I have patients who they're obese, they're greatly trained and been practicing for decades, and they're still giving them a supplement with folic acid. And they don't intend to do harm, but they truly don't know any better. And, that's where we really come back to education and, and our medical doctors have very little nutritional education. Unfortunately, that's just the way the system is. So there's just a lot of misinformation and ignorance out there still.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't discover it until going through our own journey with our son, who had both a lip tie and a tongue tie, and like the most severe of each. And again, in our schooling was no different because I believe it was just saying that folic acid is the same as folate. Hey, it's the same vitamin. Just go out and make sure your prenatal has it, and that's the same kind of stuff we were fed until being thrown into that world and realizing, wait a minute, these aren't the same things. This is a synthetic vitamin, and this is, hey, hang on, had a bait and switch here. And
absolutely, yeah. Even in our chiropractic schooling, it wasn't something that we learned about. I mean, I really started diving into functional medicine, but also, working in the birth communities, the midwives started saying, why are we seeing this in all of our babies? And started asking questions, right? And that's where change happens.
Absolutely, yeah. It has to start with people that are seeing it first, our front line, and like you said, education. I mean, that's where I believe the future of healthcare is going to be, is education, and it's going to have to be self-responsibility for people taking responsibility for their own health and not putting it on a doctor or a system or anything. It's got to come back down to the individual.
Absolutely. I think, getting back to and grounding in what we do know, right? So we do know that all those food sources that I mentioned, they aren't just high in folate, they're high in so many great nutrients should already be part of our regular diet, right? Instead of, fast food, boxed foods, frozen foods, packaged foods, we're not going to find any of that natural folate in those foods. So when you talk about building that resilience, and we're talking about all these labs and things, and sometimes, you know, we just have to go back to the very basics and clean up our environment and our lifestyle factors.
Yeah, that's an awesome transition, because I want to jump back to some of the other stressors we were talking about. We talked about some of the physical stressors of how you're holding your body, or potentially the poor potential ergonomic patterns we have every day. But then what about environment? So environmental toxins, you kind of touched on it, but we haven't dived into it. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so this has been the biggest eye-opener for me since I started seeing and practicing functional medicine with patients. Is just how horrible our environment is. And some, you know, we really focus on the things that we can control, you know, and I don't know how, you know, the Denver area is, but we live in Dallas, and, you know, the air quality is just poor, and that's not something we're going to change. But we start looking in our household, in our homes, and, you know, our carpets are full of flame retardants, formaldehyde, and we start, you know, we want to discuss these things, because you're gonna, you know, a year from now, have your little baby doing tummy time on that carpet, right? So air quality, changing out filters frequently, getting, you know, standalone filters. You know, the Air Doctor is an amazing, Austin Air is also another amazing standalone filter, because, you know, every time we turn on our oven, we're releasing toxins. If you're using a microwave, which I highly recommend you kick it to the curb. But all of those things, even within our household. And then, you know, that's air quality, right? Then we definitely want to dig into, we know water is essential for us. Right. We are mostly with water, right? So I am adamant that we are drinking a clean source of water. This is a non-negotiable for me. So our tap water is full of contaminants. They've even found, you know, trace levels of pharmaceuticals in our tap water, you know, not to mention, you know, barium, arsenic, heavy metals, fluoride, perchlorate, tons of crap, right? So we focus on getting spring water or reverse osmosis, right? And I meet everyone where they're at. If we can't, you know, a whole house filtration system can cost thousands. A tabletop reverse osmosis system can cost $300 or $400. You know, and if none of that is doable, then at least here, you know, we have grocery stores here that refill jugs, you know, with reverse osmosis water for anywhere from 12 cents to 45 cents, right? So that's air and water. Then another big we're starting to see is our mold issues, right? Anytime you have a water leak in your home, you need to get curious and really investigate, because, you know, we see mold causing a plethora of issues. Naturally, you know, something that needs to be said is we naturally have mold, yeast, fungi, viruses, bacteria in our bodies. We always have. They are not all bad guys, but we need to be in harmony in our ecosystem with them. There's a right balance of all of these things. And yeast overgrowth, mold overgrowth, these are things we're seeing, you know, happening from our environment. So something as simple, you know, as a water leak and damage in it growing in the walls, but also we find molds and mycotoxins in our coffee beans and our peanut butter bars, you know, so really just empowering and educating clients to really look through and investigate all of the things. And then, of course, you know, as far as hormone balancing, we've got to have healthy hormones to make babies. We really look at xenoestrogens, which are chemicals in our everyday environment that mimic estrogen in our body, can really cause males a lot of issues by turning their testosterone into estrogen. You know, we constantly worry about the woman, but this is happening to our men a lot, and they're having low T because they're exposed to all of these compounds. So these are in our shampoos, our colognes and perfumes, our lotions, our cookware, our glass, you know, if you're using plastics instead of glass. So really deep dive into toxins.
Yeah, that's a huge one. Did you want to say something?
Yeah,
Dr.?
I feel like, I mean, it's just, as you're going through this, I'm listing through things through like our home too, and I'm just like, okay, what are some things that have to be more mindful of? For our listeners out there, and maybe, I know for new moms or who are really new to this and are listening to this for the first time, it sounds like, a lot of this sounds, they're all important, but how much is too much? Or like, you know, I know that you talk about meeting moms where they're at and what they're comfortable with, and we do everything we can because we want the best, and at the same time it's just like, oh my gosh, you know, where does this stop? Where do we need to be? Like, where's that balance there? Because I feel like for
That's a really good point.
yeah, moms are kind of like, this is overwhelming, and then that's another stressor. And
stress, and we're causing the stress, right? So I think it starts with an awareness, and we start tackling what we can, right? So I rented, when I got pregnant, we were renting an old duplex in Dallas, and I'm sure there were lots of air and mold and all kinds of issues in there. And I decided that for me in that space, I wasn't going to investigate. I was going to try and control the things that I could. I was going to get enough sleep and rest. I was going to work on my stress management. I was going to eat well. I was going to move my body. I was going to do the things that I could control and not worry about that, because it can become a stressor, right? And because these things can become horribly expensive, and we can't fix them all at once. And what I tell every patient that sits down with me is, it's a journey, not a destination. Even when we achieve the pregnancy, it's not over. And I can't do the math of when I found chiropractic and then when I found functional medicine, but I'm not joking. Every year I see a little more improvement in my health. And we have a wish list. We have a health wish list at home. We are still, we have a couple of basic standalone air filters that we got at Costco for $100, and they have worked really well. And we definitely want to get those big fancy ones one day, but we work with what we can, right? We have a tabletop reverse osmosis that we love, but we don't have whole house filtration. And I'm a functional medicine practitioner, right? But we just have to be realistic and do what we can. So we figure that out for each individual, couple.
Yeah, I love that, because that's the same with us. I mean, there's certain things that we've slowly brought in again, and it's all one of the biggest limiting reagents that we have to work with is money, right? We only have, each of us only has so much money, so we have to be able to work with that. I mean, for us, it was first getting an air filter for the bedroom, an air purifier, and then we've got the big Berkey water filter now, because we were just doing the huff it to the grocery store, and that's a way you can do it. It doesn't cost much. It cost us, I think it was $10 maybe a week to do reverse osmosis water, remineralize it, and then we're drinking that throughout the week. But there's other simple things. Yeah, there's other simple things I know, like getting a fluoride shower filter, because a big thing that a lot of people think about is the fluoride that you're just taking through your skin and breathing it in the shower is a huge one. So just stuff like that. And and even the
and I always like to stress to everyone that every change makes a difference.
Absolutely.
And that's the truth. We could get overwhelmed and consumed and make no changes, and then we're stuck, right? So just bringing in awareness and learning about these things, we really do have to be careful that it doesn't become another thing to worry and stress about, but just know that, okay, now I know about this. I'm going to make sure my coffee's organic. That's an easier one to do, right? And we're going to maybe, our next, instead of doing a home renovation project or, buying a new patio set, we're going to, investigate that leak back there. So it's also prioritizing your health, because, and I think that's a really good important point to make too, because, we're not that far out of chiropractic school. We got some pretty good debts, and we're not rich either, but we are passionate about what we do, and we prioritize our health. So I am going to prioritize, a reverse osmosis shower head versus, a new pair of shoes, me personally, you know? And everyone just has to make their peace with those decisions. There is no right or wrong, but I think prioritization is a big piece of it too.
Absolutely. And I mean, my favorite analogy when talking about stress is one from another doctor in our profession, but like the backpack with the rocks in it and the person in the pool. It's like you keep putting rocks in the backpack, eventually that person's going to go underwater, versus you start taking the rocks out, then all of a sudden you can start to tread water, and then eventually, you know, get your head and your body above water. And it's just like you said, prioritizing and then figuring out what can I do, because everything that you do matters in terms of taking these stress loads off of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that analogy.
So I have one more. We got 10 minutes left, and this may be too big a question to answer the 10 minutes, but we're going to try our best. But I know something we haven't even talked about yet is birth control, and how critical, or how maybe not so critical, that is for women to consider when they're moving into this pregnancy journey.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because if someone has been on birth control for many years, I recommend being off of it for at least a year before trying. And I know that's really, really hard to hear, because when we are ready and we want a baby, you know, we are very, very good in this country at getting what we want. And so waiting and doing the work is hard. But we know for a fact that oral contraceptives, any hormonal, whether it's IUD, patch, or the pill, if any hormonal contraceptive is stealing our nutrients, it's very nutrient depletive, right? So it's going to be hard to get pregnant if you're nutrient depleted. And I almost believe it's worse if you do get pregnant nutrient depleted, because that baby is going to take whatever it needs. And I believe that's why we see a huge increase, you know, almost double of autoimmune disease, specifically thyroid, for moms postpartum. We see a 47% increase of autoimmune diseases postpartum in women. And if we are going in with weakened immune systems and, you know, weakened, you know, functioning, that's absolutely going to happen. So just, you know, just simply looking from a nutrient perspective, you know, I really, it's a woman's choice, and an unwanted pregnancy is, you know, definitely an issue all its own. We want our babies to be wanted and loved and nurtured. That is most important. You know, so I'm not anti in that direction, but I truly think it's important, first of all, for a re-education around women's cycles and fertility and understanding our bodies, because, you know, it's harder for people to get pregnant than we think. And we really have this small window. We really have 6 days. And, you know, if we could just start educating to be a lot careful, tracking our cycles, knowing our rhythms, knowing these days. If you have a wild cycle, then you have some things to take care of. We need to do some hormone balancing, you know. But in a healthy cycle, we have patterns. And, you know, there are new age today, there's the Ava bracelet, there's the Daisy fertility monitor that's based off of temperature. And, you know, after 3 months of using these things, they are 99% effective. They are actually more effective than the pill, because research shows that most women forget to take their pill, and user error increases its efficiency.
There you go. That's awesome. That's good to know. I never heard of those products before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, doing what you do you, I mean, it seems like not everybody knows about the importance of pre-pregnancy health, and it seems like it's necessary. How, you know, what can we do to really start to support or let people know, besides education? Like, are you feeling like there's a lack of resources right now, or, you know, is there an education or connection with doctors to be able to be aware of this, or what's that looking like in Dallas, and, you know, maybe just even in Denver? You know, how can we start to get the word out about the necessity behind you know, just the health behind pre-pregnancy?
Well, I think we're doing it right now, which is why I'm super grateful that you guys allowed me to talk, to have this conversation. I don't think it's happening enough anywhere. I really think that, as women, we just, assume that this is something our bodies are supposed to do, and it absolutely is, but it's just more indication that, our bodies are becoming more confused in our advancing society, and we need more focus and work in these areas. And, it really, my passion really stems from my own experience. I considered myself an incredibly healthy person, and as well as my husband, in chiropractic school with, a passion for nutrition, a super athlete, and, I never expected that we would have a fertility struggle. And, we ended up conceiving naturally and, in 13 months, but, it was definitely an emotional hardship. And, I started to have questions and realize, going doctor to doctor, that nobody had an answer for me. Everyone told me I was healthy, which is really what sent me down the functional medicine and functional neurology path. I mean, I love what you guys do. I have my blue light blocking glasses on right now. And that's something that I started, like 5 years ago. It was one of the many, many little lifestyle changes that add up to make a difference. And so I think just talking about it more, sharing it with our clients and our patients, and starting the conversation, because I still feel like it's definitely not talked about enough, and I don't think everyone sees the importance yet.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some resources then? I mean, obviously we'll be sharing your information as well too. However, are there resources that new parents or new couples who are really new to this world that they can go to? What are some books that maybe you recommend that you really love that really supported you in the process?
I think for a woman really understanding her health, there's a couple of great. Aviva Romm is probably one of the longest standing women's physicians. She's a midwife. She's also a licensed medical doctor, and she's written a ton of books. She's really my go-to for parents, for even their kids' health as well. But she's been around the longest, really talking about preconception, prenatal, postpartum, all things. She's kind of my expert go-to. Some others, you talk specifically about birth control. Dr. Jolene Brighton wrote a book. She's really coined the term post-birth control syndrome. And I can't remember the title of her book, but she is a great go-to in that area. There's starting to be a lot more. I wish there would be more. I think there also needs to be more talk about men's health when it comes to preconception and fertility. We now know that, unexplained infertility is 1/3, we don't know what it is, 1/3 female and 1/3 male. So it's absolutely equivalent now, and some are actually arguing, we don't have the data yet, but arguing that it is more the male than the female issue. And I really think that that's stemming back to toxicity, kind of going back down there again. But I can't think of a resource off the top of my head for men on this subject.
Guess we'll have to co-write one, because you just read my mind as we're talking about. We haven't even touched on men's health.
I mean, I just always thought that women did all the work, the men just didn't do anything. I'm just kidding, no. No.
That's a good point, because often what comes into my office is just the woman, right? And unfortunately, women, we tend to blame ourselves too. And so she's in there telling me everything that she's doing wrong, and I'm like, there's always two for this one. And so Dr. Stephanie Estima, she always says, let's not forget that women are the seed, men are the soil, right? And we're not going to grow anything without looking at both.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Very
mean, even
true.
just looking at a guy who's maybe in his early 30s or even late 20s struggling with, erectile dysfunction, like, man, that's a warning sign that something's wrong.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just a teaser for the next show. We should get Dr. Demi back on to talk about these things. 'Cause
Absolutely.
unfortunately, we're out of time today. So, Dr. Demi, where can people connect with you more to find out more about you, more about your practice? Because you are just this fountain of info that people need to know more about.
Thanks, guys. I'm most active on Instagram at Dr. So Dr_Demi, DEME. You can also find me at my website, wholeheartedchiro.com, Wholehearted Functional Health on Facebook. And I do offer virtual services. Now in the COVID epidemic, we can Zoom, so I can work with couples really anywhere that they're ready to get started.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we want to thank everybody for tuning into the show today, the Wild and Precious Optimal Living Show.
And the question for you all is, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? I hope you got some really great information from today, and we look forward to having you tuning in. So new announcement is we're going to be switching to every other week, but we will be back in next Friday, and we look forward to it. So see you all then.
See you all next Friday.